Hey, how's it going everybody? J-Mac here. Today's video is going to be on a starter Witch Doctor build for the beginning of Season 4. This build is designed to get you into Torment 1 farming as soon as you hit level 70, and to kind of simulate what it's going to be like at the beginning of the season. I put all rares on my character, low level gems, didn't spend any Paragon points whatsoever, and I don't even have a legendary potion. And honestly, the rolls on most of the gear aren't optimized for the most part. And this build is still wrecking Torment 1. Very good survivability and very good damage. The build is based around one very powerful passive for the Witch Doctor, Fetish Sycophants. When you hit enemies with your spells, you have up to a 15% chance to summon a dagger-wielding fetish to fight by your side for 60 seconds. This passive is very powerful in in-game builds, and so it just makes sense that it would be very powerful in a starter build as well. Having 15 of these guys out all the time, attacking things for you in the early game, is very powerful for survivability. They tank for you and deal a ton of damage, especially to single targets. So what we're going to do with the build is to just try to make sure that we have 15 fetishes out from this passive at all times. And to do that, we're going to run Plague of Toads, Rain of Toads. Cause toads to rain from the sky that deal 182% weapon damage as poison to enemies in the area over 2 seconds. So we're going to channel this spell, and we're going to pull things together with things like Paranado to make sure we hit multiple enemies to proc the Fetish Sycophants. Fetish Army Legion of Daggers. Summon an army of 8 dagger-wielding fetishes to fight by your side for 20 seconds. The fetishes attack for 180% of your weapon damage as physical. So when we have out 15 fetishes from the passive and 8 from this, we'll have 23 fetishes total. Normally at the beginning of a rift, if I don't have any fetishes from the passive yet, I'll go and cast this at the beginning of the rift, just so I have some damage potential. Otherwise, during the course of a rift, while I have some fetishes from the passive, I'll just cast this for the most part on elites, champions, and bosses. Soul Harvest Soul to Waste. This is going to give you 15% more intelligence at 5 stacks, which gives you damage and all resist. But more importantly, you gain 5% increased movement speed for each enemy harvested. Spirit Walk Jaunt. This is going to give you 3 seconds of invulnerability as well as movement speed. So again, like we just talked about, more movement speed, and you'll be able to dodge nasty champion and elite affixes so that you're not dying early on, and therefore you're able to efficiently farm to get those legendaries you're looking for. Piranha's Paranado. This will pull enemies together. Again, pulling the enemies together for the Rain of Toads to hit multiple enemies to then proc Fetish Sycophants as fast as you possibly can. Affected enemies will also take 15% increased damage for 4 seconds. Hex Jinx. You summon a Fetish Shaman for 12 seconds that will hex groups of enemies into pigs, and the hex enemies take 30% additional damage. Great crowd control / damage spell. Grave Injustice. You gain 1% of your maximum life and mana, and reduce the cooldown of all your skills by 1 second when an enemy dies within 20 yards. So you get a ton of cooldown reduction. This build is pretty heavily cooldown based with Soul Harvest, Paranado, Hex, and Fetish Army. And you also get some very nice sustain. The mana part isn't really a big deal in this build. You don't really use much mana since you're mostly spamming Rain of Toads, which is a mana free spell. The brand new Confidence Ritual. You deal 25% additional damage to enemies within 20 yards. 25% additional damage from one passive is very powerful, and you should have no problem in Torment 1, even right when you hit level 70, standing within 20 yards, especially if you have around 2.5 million toughness or so, which is pretty easy to get to. Pierce the Veil, 20% more damage. Again, we really don't have many mana costs in this build, so it's just a straight damage increase. And then the Fetish Sycophants, like we already discussed. Now, something to keep in mind, a belt that you're looking for early on is the Belt of Transcendence. And what that does is when you hit an enemy with a mana spender, you actually summon a Fetish Sycophant. And we're going to go over some of the items that you're looking for early on with this build here in just a minute. But once you get that belt, you're able to switch Plague of Toads, Rain of Toads over to a mana spender. And the one you're going to want is Haunt, Poisoned Spirit. So each time you hit an enemy with Haunt, Poisoned Spirit, you're going to summon a Fetish Sycophant. Very easy to keep 15 fetishes out at all times that way, but haunted enemies will also take 20% more damage from all sources, so it'll be a very nice damage increase there. Next up, let's look at some items that you're going to want to look out for at the beginning of Season 4 that will boost the build significantly. Mask of Jerem. Pets deal up to 100% more damage, and this is pretty obvious boost. Fetishes are pets. Tasker and Theo. Increases attack speed of your pets by up to 50%. Really nice damage boost to your pets again there. The Belt of Transcendence. This is what we talked about earlier. You're going to get a Fetish Sycophant whenever you hit with a mana spender. Therefore, you can remove Fetish Sycophants as a passive from your abilities and run something like Spirit Vessel or Gruesome Feast, or some other defensive passives like Jungle Fortitude, and then you can also switch out Reign of Toads for Poison Spirit Haunt to get even more damage. The Carnival's been revamped so that the closest 5 fetishes to you shoot a very powerful poison dart. So at this point, if you want to run a Carnival early on, you're probably going to switch out your Reign of Toads to some sort of poison dart rune, and those 5 fetishes will be doing very significant damage for you from range while your other fetishes attack in melee. You're going to want to look out for 2 pieces of the Zuni Mosses set. The 2-piece reads, your fetish army lasts until they die, and the cooldown of your fetish army is reduced by 80%. So once you get 2 pieces of Zuni, whatever 2 pieces, it doesn't really matter, you're going to have pretty much permanent fetish army, which will be a very significant boost in damage. And then lastly, we've got the Star Metal Kukri. Definitely one of the most rare weapons in the game, but you never know, you might get lucky and find one early on. Reduce the cooldown of Fetish Army and Big Bad Voodoo by 1 second each time your fetishes deal damage. Again, another weapon's going to give you permanent Fetish Army, and also permanent Big Bad Voodoo Slam Dance. So if you were to get a Star Metal early on, you're going to want to switch out probably Languish or Hex Jinx for Big Bad Voodoo Slam Dance, which is an attack speed and damage buff to you and your pets. Now there are quite a few other items that are really good to look out for early on in the season. If you happen to get a Belt of Transcendence and 2-piece Jade Harvester to where your haunts are dealing even more damage with that 2-piece, that's a great combo. These are just the items that I wanted to really showcase to look out for early on for this particular build. There are definitely probably 5 or 10 other items that are going to be very good for the setup. You also want to look out for an ancient weapon. It doesn't really matter what kind of weapon it is, just an ancient legendary weapon, because the damage range rolls so much higher being ancient. Let's quickly go over some stat priorities on gear. Now, I don't think it really matters if you run a one-hander and a mojo or a two-hander. Early on, both are fine. I prefer the mojo and one-hander for the extra crit chance on the mojo. Early on, you're going to be picking up pretty much everything, and until you get some legendary pieces, these are the stats you're going to want to look for on the rare items that you find. On the weapon, you want to have intelligence in a socket. On the mojo, intelligence, vitality, and crit chance. Boots, intelligence, vitality, armor, move speed. On the pants, intelligence, vitality, 2 sockets. Belt, intelligence, vitality, armor. Chest piece, intelligence, vitality, 3 sockets. The helm, intelligence, crit chance, and a socket. Shoulders, int, vit, and if you can get it, fetish army damage is quite nice. On the gloves, int, crit damage, crit chance. On rings, you want intelligence and crit damage and crit chance if you can get that. Bracers, physical damage, intelligence, crit chance. And then on the amulet, you really want intelligence, crit chance, crit damage. Now, one thing to keep in mind in this patch, they changed it so that fetish army damage on gear actually affects the fetish sycophants from the passive as well. So this is going to buff your fetish army as well as fetish sycophants. 2 stat goals I'd recommend getting to for Torment 1 farming would be 300k damage and then about 2,500,000 toughness should be plenty. So there you go, guys. This will be the build that I'm running as soon as I hit level 70 on Friday for Season 4, and I hope it helps you guys too. So as always, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.